Howdy folks, welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. We've spent literally hundreds of hours interviewing some of the most renowned photographers of our time, giving you access to knowledge and expertise that's not available anywhere else. As always, I'm your host, Kersten, and in today's episode, we're going to deep dive into retouching iPhone photography and how to create mind-blowing Hollywood movie posters with the best in the business. So buckle up, grab a cold one, let's shake it up with today's guest right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake Podcast, episode 146. But hang on, wait a minute. Before we get into today's episode, I have one small favor to ask of you. We will be sharing some incredible, amazing news very soon. So if you enjoy this podcast, please join the Camera Shake community over on camerashakepodcast.com so that you're the first ones to know. You'll find the link in the description, or if you're watching on YouTube, it'll be right down here somewhere on the screen. But without further ado, let's give it up for today's special guest, the retoucher, photographer, educator, iPhone aficionado, and the person who told me everything I know about skin retouching. Give it up for the one and only LISA CARNEY. LISA, how are you?
Howdy. Thank you so much for having me.
It's fantastic.
Everything you know, really?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
Oh, that makes me happy.
Yeah, definitely. Frequency separation, one of the greatest classes on creative life, 100%.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. The thing about frequency separation is, like, for me, it was so hard. And I thought, how can I talk about this like a normal human?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Not like frequency, algorithm, all blah, blah.
No. And it's the name itself, the term frequency separation. It's like immediately, it's like, what the hell is that?
Exactly right. Yeah.
So it is. And I remember, I used to retouch skin completely differently before that. Mm-hmm. And then I sort of heard about frequency separation, and, like everyone else, I watched a few YouTube videos and that sort of thing. And, I came across a method that was actually super simple. And it was basically sort of an action, and, you just select basically the whole skin, press two buttons, and it was done. And it sort of, it worked to a degree, but once I then, I watched your class, I all of a sudden realized where the power really lies, which is the power, of actually being selective, with how far you go in different parts of the face. And, and it's just really, it's opened up a whole world when it comes to frequency, when it comes to skin retouching for me.
Well, that's awesome. And I'll tell you, I use it on every single job I have for everything, and not just skin. Like, I use it for everything. I think it's amazing. Yeah. Well,
interestingly enough, during the pandemic, so I'm a portrait photographer, really, and a headshot photographer. So, but during the pandemic, of course, over here in the UK, we had really strict limitations, as in, like, we had massive lockdowns, and, photographing other humans was sort of frowned upon at the time, obviously, or outright illegal, actually. So, so I had to resort to photographing products, to a point, because what are you going to do? And so people could just send me stuff, and I'd photograph it and send it back. But that's really where I learned the value of frequency separation when it comes to products as well. And it was just, again, an eye-opener.
Yeah, it's really great. Well, that really makes me happy to hear, and that it worked, because you never know. You put stuff out there in the universe, and you never know. Do people understand it? Do they like it? Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's, I remember, at first, of course, it was completely over my head, but it's the way you explained it in that class it just made so much sense. And also it was really progressive. So, it was like, as I got into it, I'm like, oh, okay, this makes perfect sense now, Duh. And it's just, I don't know, it just increased my power when it comes to retouching, which is always useful.
That's great. Yeah, it was life-changing for me. It was single-handedly the largest editing change since Photoshop came out with layers, frankly, if you ask me. Yeah, it was revolutionary.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so talking about Photoshop, do you think, with all the AI developments and stuff, and the things that are happening, even as part of Photoshop now, do you think that's another sort of groundbreaking change when it comes to just Photoshop, but also retouching in general?
Yeah, yes and no. So it depends on what level you play. I think for your average consumer, and someone who's maybe at I don't want to sound snobby, but at a base level, 100%. The thing is, for pro level work and the type of work you have to do, you have to be able to go backwards or change it. And when you rely too much on AI, what happens is your chops get really crappy. And then you get a job where someone's turned profile or something else, and the AI won't do it. How do you fix it? Do you understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
the AI is, while it's interesting and cool, it's also a little dangerous.
It's definitely, I think it's very useful from a portrait photography point of view, especially when you're doing like commercial things like headshots, for example, and you have like a huge turnaround in not a lot of time.
Yes.
At that point, it's super helpful because it just cut your
100%.
It just cut your work in half, or
Absolutely.
even less than that. But I totally agree with you. When you're doing anything that's more intricate, then as you said, you haven't got the option to dive into certain specific details of it or roll it back or and that's where it becomes tricky.
And it also, I think, becomes tricky in terms of practice. So hear me out. So I get you on volume stuff. Oh my God, 100%. But then what happens when you lose your practice for it because you haven't done it? And then you get some jobs where you have to do it and the clock is ticking and the clients want their stuff, but you don't remember how to do it. You've lost that. You know what I mean? That your chops. I have no other word for it other than chops. And what do you do then? So it's a slippery slope. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I find that, when I spend a lot of time doing other things other than headshots, and then I come back to it, it just takes me a minute or two, to just get back into it. And especially when I do things that, I just have to do on one particular job and I don't usually use that particular technique or something, then, when 6 months later I have to do a similar thing, I really have to go back to how did I do that? Like, how does that work?
How do I fix that?
Yeah, exactly. But you have retouched some of the most famous and most well-known movie posters there are in the industry. Everything from CSI, How to Train Your Dragon, my daughter's
so much
favorite.
Fun working on that. Yeah. So much fun.
And The Boys. I mean, my wife and I are totally addicted to The Boys, so that is a fantastic poster. Everything from
campaign.
Yeah, and Your Honor. What an image.
I have to say, I was really, that's the Your Honor series. There's actually 2 in that series.
Yeah.
And I was so thrilled that Showtime came to me because that was one of the few times in kind of modern recollection where it was such a challenging job because those were full daylight shots.
Right.
Full daylight, especially as a profile one where he's in shadow. And it was shot with blown out, it was a unit shot basically. Meaning they shot it on set. And I was like, I actually get to work for this one.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like it was a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I really, really appreciated doing.
The results are amazing.
Thank you.
It's one of those images that really sticks out immediately. I mean, over here in the UK, it's on Paramount. And I guess it's on Showtime already.
Here too.
And as soon as it comes up, the shot comes up and everybody notices it. Like everybody's noticing it. Like even my 17-year-old, actually no, 19-year-old daughter now.
They go fast. Yes.
I know, right? Even she was talking about it. It's just such a striking black and white shot.
The creative director and the photographer did a really great job. I have to say, the thing is, but especially I think the one you're referring to is a straight on angle one. Yeah. You have no clue. Folks don't have any clue what goes into that. That beard has probably 20 layers of hair painted over it. It's been redone. It's amazing. And the hair is completely redone. No one would know. Hopefully, if I do my job right, they don't know.
Yeah, but that's the key, isn't it? I mean, the better you do your work, the less anybody notices.
100%. That's totally accurate. Yeah.
That's incredible.
So, I've been really lucky in my career to get to work on some pretty amazing and fun projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we'll talk a little bit more about your poster work or your retouching work. But I think let's start with something that I didn't really know until recently that you were into, which is iPhone photography.
It's my love. It is my 100% passion. It's the thing I'm most excited about that I do every day. Yeah.
And I think you've just come back from WPPI.
Yeah. We had a really great session. So WPPI, which is Wedding Portrait Professional International, it's a huge, huge photo conference. And what I love about talking at WPPI is it's all large sensor camera shooter people. And man, they come in that room like, you show me something, right? Yeah. And I get it. I totally get it. And I think by the time they leave, they're like, oh, wow, wait a minute. This is amazing. And I'll tell you something. I'm old enough, not that you can tell, that I was around when digital first came along. So I was, my degree's in photography. I was a format shooter, 4x5. I shot a lot of Polaroid, 55 Polaroid. But I hand lined my own film, color film, black and white film, and did my own printing, black and white color. And digital was just starting to come out, and Photoshop was just coming out, and everyone was like, "Oh no, this is crap. This isn't going to take over. Everyone's wrong." And obviously, it did take over. It became the new world. And honest to Buddha, I'm telling you, I've got the same sensation about mobile photography, smartphone photography. I don't like calling it smartphone photography. I call it mobile.
Yeah.
And I've got the exact same spidey sense. Like, this is really going to revolutionize our work, our professional workflow.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, I think it's huge, you know.
And I'll tell you, I have my camera is different than my phone. I have a phone. I have another device that's my phone. To me, this is my camera. It doesn't have a SIM card. I don't call my mama on it. I don't send texts from it. This is my camera. So.
Right. So you literally,
sorry.
That's cool. So you literally have an iPhone that's dedicated to photography.
100%. Yeah. And I have that for a couple reasons. The main reason is I'm clumsy. I drop things. I just do. And so I don't want to drop or scratch that. The other reason is I like to keep that very streamlined. I only have the apps I need on it, nothing else. I don't bog it down with anything. It's really streamlined.
When it comes to iPhone photography, especially with the iPhone 14, I think it's just made such a leap forward. You know, again,
Huge.
You know, as far as the lenses are concerned, I don't know if, like, I remember a few generations ago, I used to have like different what they call moment lenses that I used to use for those.
Yeah. I will tell you, I still use the moment macro.
Right.
The focal fall off on that is so stunning, and it's so much better than the iPhone for me also. So I use the moment macro still. Plus, it's got that beautiful diffusion ring on it. Oh, the moment macro lens it's a thing of beauty. And occasionally I'll use the wide, because their wide angle lens is so beautiful. It's warm. It's just gorgeous. So those two lenses I still use.
So the wide angle lens on the iPhone, I often think that comes in really handy. I very often switch to that when I just don't have the opportunity to, you know, to put in like a 14-24 on, you know, on my camera body sort of a thing.
Yeah.
And I find that really very practical. And actually the images are awesome, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I think people get, with the iPhone in particular, I don't know about Google phones or Android phones. I feel like photographers don't pay attention to the focal length of the camera phone. So I don't think most people realize, but the telephoto, the 3, that's like a 77 millimeter lens. And the 1, I hate the names. I wish they'd name them focal length, but whatever. I'm not ruling the universe yet. I believe the 1 is something like a 24 or 28. So if you're shooting portraits, you don't want to shoot it on a 1 on an iPhone. You want to shoot it on the 2 or 3, because people get distorted faces.
Exactly. So I started a portrait series a couple of years ago that I called 3 Heads in a Row, which is
yes, I think I saw your Dave Williams one.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so the idea there is, I mean, that's shot at around 24 mil, I guess 24 to 28 mil roughly. And the idea there is that I want the distortion because I want it to look hyper real and slightly cartoonish, you know, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Theatrical.
It's theatrical. Yeah. And so, you know, I wanted to look like a caricature of the subject, you know, of the person. And so that focal length comes in super handy. And it's, you know, it's one of these things, in portrait photography, obviously, you know, we often say like, okay, you don't want to shoot at least anywhere below 50 or something like that, you know, 85, 100, whatever, you know, in that sort of region. But sometimes these wide focal lens actually come in really handy.
100%. And I guess what I was trying to refer to, because I agree 100% with you. It's actually, I find people when they're shooting with mobile photography, they're not quite as mindful about that. They're not thinking about it. So,
that's very true.
Because, you know, it's in your pocket, you pull it out. Oh, I'm going to shoot you. And I'm always encouraging folks, well, take a second. Do you want the wide? Do you want it distorted, or do you want it? And with the phone, I think folks don't think about it the way you would when you have your DSLR or your pack. You're actually choosing your lens. You're more conscious of your choices.
That's right. And that's one of the things I think, sometimes when I take your camera body with me, because it slows me down a little bit, I actually quite like that because it makes me think, but I've sort of come around to mobile photography, over the last, over the last 6 months or something. I use it a lot more for anything other than just family snapshots,
Yeah.
But also in video that's another huge thing for me, because I do a lot of video stuff. And the quality that you can achieve with an iPhone nowadays is really stunning.
Yeah.
For the amount of effort you have to put into it.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
You've got the immediacy of it because it's available. You're not carrying a bunch of stuff. It's lighter, so you can access it faster. Also, I don't know if you're finding this with your subjects. I find it's so ubiquitous to have smartphones that folks don't react the same way when a smartphone's in their face versus a camera lens. And so I find, to be honest, get a more natural and comfortable subject matter than when I have a big camera in someone's face.
Of course. I mean, it's one of these things, we're so used to seeing mobile phones or cell phones. And, we've grown so accustomed to that it's just a normal thing, but having somebody stick like a massive lens in your face, on a big camera, not very many people are very used to that. And I find that, of course, when I do the 3 ads in a row thing, I need to coax these extreme expressions out of the subject. And so I need to spend some time beforehand building up trust. And I've spoken about this on this podcast many times, but basically the idea is that, I spend time, I build up the trust so I can get them to the point where they trust me enough so that I can get them to give me these extreme expressions. Not a problem with Dave Williams because he's naturally goofy, obviously.
He is goofy. Yes, he can't help it. Well, I'll tell you, I'm sorry, I can't show it to you here. I have a little Canva trigger. And so I often hold my phone, like, I'll show you. Somewhere even chest level down here. And I'm just talking and I'm triggering the whole time.
Great.
Because I often shoot folks who are really uncomfortable. They're not used to being photographed. They don't like the idea of being photographed, all sorts of things. And I'm triggering, just we're talking. Yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so inconspicuous,
Yes.
I even, one thing I was thinking about recently is I sort of have a love for street photography. And in street photography, of course, it's a problem having a huge camera, because people are immediately a lot more conscious of what you're doing. And then the whole idea of creating candid photography kind of goes out of the window because you're there with a huge lens and,
they see you. Yeah.
And so the alternative is always to shoot with something like a Fuji X100, something like that, or like a smaller camera or a Leica if you're a dentist, I don't know. Maybe. But the mobile phone really comes in really handy for that, I think.
Yeah. I'll tell you, when I first started shooting, I was living in Florence, Italy, and I was working at a lab, and I'd ride across the bridges, the Ponte, and I had a rangefinder, and I would just do the focus, and it literally hung around my neck, and I would just be shooting people, and they had no idea I was even shooting. But I had to get really good at the focus because you do the focus with the dials on the top. But it was great. It was a great way to be candid.
Yeah. And I mean, I've had a look at your website, and your portfolios look stunning. I mean, your landscape photography, this is another thing. Like, your landscape photography is so stunning, and especially, I love the black and white shots.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have to say, I'm a black and white shooter. I really am.
Yeah.
From long back, from film days. And I'm hard pressed to do color, to be honest. I see the world a little differently.
Yeah. It's this thing, I also have sort of a tendency to go for the black and white type of look. And I've sort of somehow had this mental barrier when it comes to landscape photography, because I'm not much of a landscape photographer anyhow, but I always, I kind of thought back, how can I make this work in black and white other than the Ansel Adams sort of school of thought.
Yeah.
But I was looking at your shots and I was thinking, like, that's completely, this little light bulb that went on in the back of my mind. I'm like, this is extremely cool.
Oh,
So
you're really sweet. Thank you. I'll tell you, I have a class I taught. I don't know if it's still out there, where I was teaching the zone system, Ansel Adams zone system
yeah,
for mobile photography. I was like, we're
fantastic.
doing mobile and we can still talk about the zone system. We can do black and white photography mobile, but still think of, traditional techniques and tone and contrast and whatnot.
So when you shoot, do you already think like a retoucher, or does that not enter into it when you're taking the shot?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm a little embarrassed by this. I'm not sure why I'm embarrassed by this, but I am a retoucher. I'm a heavy editor. And if anyone looked at my photography, it's heavily edited. I am not a straight out of the camera. So I have to be super honest. I take a shot, I process it right then and there, full process on my phone. I'm a heavy Lightroom user, Lightroom mobile user. And then once I know what I think I want, then I go shoot. So I'll shoot a frame or two. That's it. Do all my processing and then continue to shoot, because I have it in my head then what I want to do.
Yeah, because I wondered about this because actually, again, you and me are very similar in that sense. I shoot for the edit because I already know how I'm going to process it afterwards. So I know what I need in order to get this done in post processing. So so I'm also not an old school sort of shooter, who thinks everything has to be perfect in camera. There's a sort of a comparison I always use when I talk at like camera clubs and stuff, because very often in things like camera clubs, the audience is usually a little bit older, and you have that school of thought of people who are of the opinion that you should get it right in camera. And the way I compare it usually is I usually say, it's a little bit like an electric guitar and an amplifier. Like the electric guitar without an amplifier is very quiet and makes hardly any sound. And it certainly doesn't sound like what we would consider to be the sound of an electric guitar. An amplifier on its own is just a dead box. It's inanimate. It doesn't make any sound. But you plug one into the other and use them both in conjunction with each other. All of a sudden, you get these beautiful sounds and beautiful music.
I was going to say something, though. I'm going to call a little bit of bullshit on the old school notion of getting it right in camera. Because here's the thing. Ansel Adams, you ever see his darkroom markups?
Oh, yes.
Right? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, no kidding. Cartier-Bresson, same thing. Like old school shooters. And sure, they caught the subject, but the flowering of the subject is all done in the dark room. We've just switched the dark room from a dark room to this. This is now the dark room also.
Yes, exactly. I've been to Ansel Adams' studio. I've seen it.
My mama met him, which is so exciting.
Oh, wow.
Yes. But people don't think about that. Dodging and burning in a dark room. Why is that any less different than the manipulation we do in our editing?
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly it.
And the magic of this is key magic, because I live up near Lake Tahoe. And so I'm out in nature in the forest. And I'm out there on a paddleboard, and I just sit down and I do a full edit while I'm shooting, realize, I need to paddle over a little more and move to have the light a little different, or I need to change my exposure, expose more for the highlights, whatever. And I'm still on the board. Do you know what I mean? I don't have to wait until I get home to the studio or something. I can figure it out all while I'm right there so that I don't miss the shot.
So take us through your retouching or your post-processing process on your mobile device. What does that look like?
So what I currently do, I used to shoot through, Lightroom. I use Lightroom Mobile a ton. And Lightroom Mobile has 5 cameras on it within the app. Most people don't know that. It's got 5 cameras. I used to shoot through Lightroom because the algorithm was so much better than the native iPhone camera.
Right.
Now the native iPhone camera is so much better. I no longer have to do that. So I generally shoot through iPhone capture on the app. I bring it right into Lightroom. And then I do whatever editing I think I need to do. The masking in Lightroom Mobile is extraordinary. So I relight things all the time in the camera. Like I did a catalog shoot not that long ago, and low budget. Oh my God, there was like no money. Client was standing next to me and she's like, I want it a little darker and to have a spot behind it. And can we make it blue? Can we put a gel on that? And I was like, absolutely. I stood there with my phone and did all that with masking in Lightroom Mobile. And I said something like this. She had an iPad that synced to my Lightroom so she could see it larger.
Yeah.
And she was like, okay, great. Yeah, that's good. We shot the whole job. I command pasted the settings and pasted it to all of them, and it just and it repopulated all of them. Blue gel, glow behind the subject, all sorts of stuff. I didn't have to put a gel on it. I didn't have to relight it. We just kept going.
Yeah. So do you literally do you retouch everything on your phone, or do you put it on an iPad, or do you use Lightroom Classic?
Great question. I have to tell you, I do it all on the phone. I understand some people like the iPad because there's more real estate, visual real estate, and they can see more. I do it all on the phone. And then on my large desktop, I'll do any final editing that I need to do, because with Lightroom, it's a seamless sync.
Yeah. Do you switch back and forth between Lightroom and Photoshop a lot?
No, I don't. So, it's interesting. I can't believe I'm going to admit this. In my photography, it's all Lightroom. It's a rare day that I go to Photoshop. I mean, like hardly ever. With my professional work, with my movie poster work, because I'm sure your viewers know this, ACR, which is Adobe Camera Raw, is Lightroom. It's the same thing.
Yes,
it's
same engine.
Lightroom Classic, Lightroom, or it's Camera Raw in Photoshop. So anymore, I'm doing 70% of my retouching and color work in Camera Raw, and then opening it in Photoshop and finishing it up.
See,
isn't that crazy?
I know, it's incredible. And again, I pretty much do exactly the same thing. I just use Lightroom. So I use the engine, in Lightroom, and then as I flip-flop back and forth between Photoshop and Lightroom.
Well, I'll say it's no different than what I do. I just happen to be using Camera Raw. It's the same. Yeah. And that's the beauty of it. Like, once you figure out that ACR or Adobe Camera Raw is Lightroom Mobile and is Lightroom Classic, you're fluid and you're not tied to one or the other. You're free to do what works for you. Yeah.
So how does the Lightroom Mobile version compare to the Classic version? Do you know, like, are there any functions that you don't have in the mobile version compared to Classic?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to be 100% clear. I do not touch Lightroom Classic. Sorry, that's snow falling in my house. I don't know if you can hear it, but cool. There's a snow cascade happening right now. So Lightroom Classic is effectively the same engine as Lightroom, only there are a few things you can do in Classic that you can't do in Lightroom. I do not use Classic, but there's things like brushes in Lightroom Classic that they don't have in Lightroom Mobile. And I mean like effects brushes.
Right.
And printing modules, they don't have printing modules. But effectively, they're pretty much the same thing. And if you prefer Classic, you can still work out on location with mobile, come back to the studio and sync it to Classic.
I tell you what, my one gripe, and I love Lightroom, really to bits, but my one gripe that I have with it is the tethering. The tethering on it is awful. My God.
I know.
It's
slower than molasses. Lord willing and the creek don't rise. They'll fix that eventually.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I still prefer Lightroom to Capture One.
So I recently, very, very recently, got the free test version of Capture One.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just simply because, well, first of all, when Mac upgraded to the latest operating system, all of a sudden Lightroom lost all ability to tether to Nikon cameras. So that was the first thing. I was like, okay, well, that sucks because now I have a problem because I have clients. Yeah. So I found this idiotic workaround which went through like Nikon's native capture software, and then I connected it to Lightroom, and Lightroom was dragging the files out of the capture folder, and it just, it was like you were just literally sitting there, counting your chickens whilst that image creeps through the cable into, it took absolutely forever. So it got to the point where, and then it would cut off frequently, and then it wouldn't connect to the camera again and all that kind of stuff. So I finally gave in, and I tried to Capture One. And I have to say, from a connection point of view, Capture One beats Lightroom
100%.
hands down. And the speed at which it captures is phenomenal in comparison,
Yes.
However, though, I have to say that from an editing point of view, I then load all the images back into Lightroom afterwards in order to do all the post-processing, and mainly because in my workflow, for me, it just makes more sense. It's more comfortable because I flip-flop back and forth to Photoshop, and it's just so easy,
Yeah. So I'll tell you on a professional work environment level, I mean, obviously you need to use whatever technology works best for you. And 90% of photographers, celebrity shooters, they're using Capture One, hands down. Where it gets challenging on a professional level is, okay, who's getting this file now? Where is this file? Is it all you? You're doing the retouching. It's in-house. Great. Oh, do you have to send it to a studio? So when you send it to a studio, like a movie studio or entertainment art agency, who then sends it to someone like me, do I have Capture One? Do I own Capture One? Retouchers do not own Capture One.
Yes,
I own
that makes
Capture One
sense.
because I shoot. I'm the odd bird. The folks at the studio, do they have it? Does their photo department have it? Do their photo department know how to use it? But I sure as shit can tell you they know Photoshop, because every agency and everybody's using Photoshop. So there's a languaging issue. And then you get that envelope delivery. So you Capture One, you can either deliver a sidecar, the COS files, or an envelope, an EIS file or ESP file. I'm sorry, I can't remember the acronym. Well, studios or entertainment ad agencies or retouchers get it, and they're like, where's the sidecar? Because they get separated. People don't deliver, and it's a nightmare. So it really depends on your workflow and who your clients are.
So from an ease of workflow point of view, really Lightroom Mobile makes perfect sense then, because you shoot on mobile, you process it right there on the phone, done.
Yeah. And then you get to the studio and it's on your desktop. Plus, you can, so picture this. I'll give you a little roundout about how a typical client shoot goes, let alone a personal shoot. But let's say I'm doing a client direct shoot here in Lake Tahoe area. I've already figured out my presets. I already figured out what color I'm looking for. I've got the vibe I'm looking for. Often I get hired because someone will say, oh, I saw your XYZ photo and I'm looking for something that has that feel. Great. So I've got my presets already loaded. If it's client direct and there's messaging, logo, or literally messaging happening, Instagram, social posts, I have their logo loaded up on my device, either black or white, because in Lightroom, you can actually export with logos in position. Do this all the time. So imagine I have a paddleboard client and we're out on Donner Lake shooting or Lake Tahoe. I put the logo in and export it right there so I can see, oh crap, I need to move over 1.5 inches or have the model move so the logo will fit.
Right.
I don't get back to the studio and go, oh crap, I'm going to have to extend the water because I didn't have it in the right position. Plus, there's some amazing third-party apps that will add lighting effects and text effects. So imagine I have a healthcare professional up here. I did their studio, and for their email, they wanted an image afterwards that said, for the email, like if someone signed up on their website, they'd get an immediate email with another image that had a great picture of this guy. And it said, thank you for choosing us for our healthcare needs, your healthcare needs, or something like that. Or no, I'm sorry. It was, thank you for trusting us with your health. That's what it was. And I did it on the phone, the whole edit with him. And I showed it to him and I go, honey, is this what you're looking for? He's like, oh my God, that's great. I sent it to it. They sent it out that day.
Yeah.
And, I didn't have to go back to my studio and send him 5 different emails and like choices. It was like, oh, right here. Are you happy? On my phone.
That's as much of a breakthrough as I think, when that change from analog to digital happened. And all of a sudden, because I remember talking to Moose Peterson a while ago, and he told me when he first shot his first magazine project or whatever on a digital, he managed to send the files off straight away to the editor, and they literally got it within an hour of him shooting the images. And the kind of furore that caused at the time,
I mean, can you imagine? You've got your preset in there, you've got your toning. Heck, you can do retouching. There's ways to do even beauty retouching in Lightroom on your phone. It's not that hard. And again, messaging. So imagine how much you can upsell your services. Like Absolutely. It's not just, oh, I'm the shooter. It's hard. The photo market's hard right now. So can you imagine, oh, let me do your social campaign for the whole month. Shit, let me do it for the whole year. And you've got it all right there. And I'll tell you something, honey, I suck at type. Jesus, Mary, I suck at it. And these apps have preloaded layouts, like the type's all there. And you could do tracking and wait. Oh, it's amazing.
So what are your favorite third-party apps on the iPhone?
Again, I'm an iPhone user, so I want to be really clear because some of these don't work with Google or Android. So Mexers is my all-time favorite layering texture app for arty looking stuff. It's slow as molasses and it's beautiful. So for me, it's 100% worth it. The time. Lens distortions, stupid name, great app. Those are my two favorite, and they both work in Photoshop as well. So if you have to do something, reproduce something higher res, you can. And lens distortion is amazing. Lens effects. If anyone goes on my website or my Instagram, they see I do a lot of snow shots. I shoot out here. You can't capture snow with the iPhone.
Yeah.
You cannot. It won't show. Lens distortion has weather effects you can put in.
Oh, great.
So I can actually make a piece feel like it felt when I'm standing there, even though it didn't look like it in the raw capture. And again,
Fantastic.
lens distortion has amazing type layouts you can use.
And of course, anybody listening or watching this on YouTube, we will have links to those apps in the description below. No problemo.
Fantastic. Again, mixtures is slow. I want to say that 5 times. It's slow as molasses, but it's worth it. So stick with it.
Let's talk a little bit about your Hollywood movie poster, or your history within that particular business, because it's one of these, it's a part of the industry that I think for the vast majority of people is probably the least understood part of the industry. Because as photographers, we look at movie posters, we understand the photography in it, but when it comes to the retouching and all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes, that's almost like that's sort of a part of the industry that I think most people are not familiar with. And I know I've heard you describe yourself as a finisher rather than a designer.
Exactly right.
Yeah, just explain a little bit more.
Let me talk to you about, and I'll tell you a few little dirty secrets about our industry. So what happens is we get A-list photographers shooting the movie posters. A-list, big photographers get hired to shoot it, but they get asked for somebody on a gray seamless. All the magic is done in Photoshop because we need that kind of flexibility. So when you look at a movie poster, you're like, wow, look at that. Isn't it amazing? That's all done in Photoshop. We get a straight capture generally from 90% of the photographers that we do. Design versus finish. So for a movie, Heckfire, Spider-Man, what did they do? Like 3,000 designs? And then they pick 5 to finish. So as a designer, designing's hard. That's where all the heavy lifting happens, I think. It's really hard. It hardly pays.
Right.
And you put your love and life into something, and then someone says, it's crap. We don't want it. Or they pick the ugliest one. They'll pick the safest one. Movie companies are very known for safe imagery. They're not brave because a lot of money on the table for it. So a finisher, it will come to me and we start from a very low res file that's sort of worked out. And then I reproduce it super high res and as perfect as possible. So my files are often 20 to 50 gigs.
Right. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Huge. So finishers make more money. So that's the other perk. Say the truth. And there's not many of us.
What's the delivery like? Like what sort of file types do you receive? Do you get different layers of different elements? With a brief or how?
Yes. So always I get a layered file to replicate, but oftentimes either the designers are self-taught or it's gone through multiple hands. So they're a mess. You get color correction with retouching on top of that, with something else on top of that. And I have to deconstruct it and start over. My deliverables really interesting since COVID and since streaming really, really took off. 80% of my deliverables are for digital only. They're not even going to print. Isn't that interesting? 80%. I mean, we still do the big posters, but and the files are stupid huge, but that's okay.
Yeah, I guess that's really something that's obviously exploded since COVID is the streaming, different streaming platforms, and I've really noticed the amount of effort that's going into thumbnails and the art behind it. Whenever a new show comes up, it's and Your Honor is a really good example for that actually. Or The Boys or something.
It's a lot. I thought streaming was going to kill my business. We're going to streaming, no more posters, and it's the exact opposite. It's taken off.
There must be a business model in designing YouTube thumbnails somewhere.
Yes. Oh, I'm certain of it. And the beautiful thing is if you're into it, if you're good, like I'm good at Photoshop, read Photoshop. So I'm super fast because, one, I've been doing it for 110 years, but my brain really understands it. And if there's folks who have that kind of inclination, like they dig it, they understand thumbnails, they like doing it, Heckfire would be great business to produce. Because I know a lot of people who have YouTube channels, and Jesus, they don't know how to make an end card. We call those end cards, thumbnails, end cards, letterboxes. We call it things like that. Great business to get into.
So how did you first get started in that line of business?
So a long time ago, I graduated from Art Center College of Design with a degree in photography. And I was a portrait shooter, editorial portrait shooter. And that business was all in New York. And I was living in LA and I didn't want to move to New York. And I owed like $100,000 for my degree.
Wow.
And at the time, there were about 150,000 photographers in LA alone. And I knew I was in trouble. And I was really good at Photoshop. Photoshop just started coming out. It had no layers back then. And I'll tell you, there was a movie poster company called Metaphor Imaging, and it was right next door to the camera shop I worked at. I was working at camera shops so I could get free rentals. And I kept walking by and I was like, God, I would love to do that. And back in those days, because Photoshop was just starting out, they used proprietary hardware. So it was a Shimaseki machine. Like the machine cost $1 million. The operators made $450,000 a year, and there were probably only 20 in the whole country. And I thought, I want to do that. So I started asking how I could get into that, to do that kind of work. And they let me in. And then all of a sudden the Mac Quadra came out. This is how I'm dating myself so badly. And that changed the game because the computer got so fast. People were all of a sudden like, oh, wait a minute. We don't have to use this $1 million machine. We could use these smaller boxes. And I was in the right spot at the right time.
How did you first get into like designing movie posters for like big Hollywood productions?
Well, that's that company Metaphor. They were probably one of the top 3 shops in Los Angeles. And I just walked into the number, 1, 2, or 3. They'd say they were number one shot in LA. And then I just started as a junior artist there. And then I got better and better, and the design was fun. So I would see these designers coming in. Back then they would do designing with the Xeroxes, if you can imagine, and cut and paste. And then they were starting to use Photoshop, and it just kind of became a natural progression to move from a finishing only house to an entertainment design agency where they do everything.
So has the industry in that respect, has it changed completely? I mean, I can imagine that, from a time where you needed like, $1 million computer to now, I bet that whole industry looks completely different now.
Yeah, finishing houses don't exist anymore. The whole industry of just doing a finish, they're gone. They're now in-house, either at entertainment ad agencies, or it's people like me who have our own little tiny company and we work. However, I got to tell you, the interesting thing is what hasn't changed is the design industry, the entertainment design industry. It's all the same people. They just switch tools.
Right.
Does that make sense? So like the old school people are still the same ones doing it. They're just not using cut and paste and glue. They're using computers. That's all.
Yeah, because I guess, because the skill set is still the same, regardless of what the tool is.
Same skill set. Yeah.
So what sort of degree of freedom do you have when, let's say, you get to finish a particular movie poster? So how much freedom do you have in that to change things, or do you have a very tight brief? How does that work?
That's a great question. It depends on who you're doing it for. So if you're doing film festival stuff, you have a lot of freedom because there's not so many people involved. If you're doing major motion picture, you have zero freedom to do anything. There are so many people have signed off on that is it. Television and streaming. In fact, I'll tell you something interesting. About 20 years ago, I switched from doing major motion picture finishing to television. This was before streaming. And everyone's like, what are you doing that for? Don't you want to work on the big pictures? And it was like, no, the big pictures are terrible. If someone's arm is the wrong size and their ears are all tweaked wrong, you have to leave it because so many people signed off on that. Don't you dare fix it.
Right.
And with television, they were like, no, make it look as good as you can. I know that sounds crackers, but that's just the way it ended up working. And then streaming came along and it changed to the whole flow. So depends on who you're working for. When I'm working directly with a studio, like if I'm doing work with Paramount and Showtime, I feel like I have more flexibility to actually provide a better service and offer suggestions and change because I'm talking directly to the person buying the product. If I'm working for an entertainment ad agency, there are so many people ahead of me in the food chain. And people are afraid to say, hey, can we make their head bigger? Oh, can we fix her lip? No one wants to say anything. So I don't have as much liberty.
Is that does that go back to the actual, let's say, star of the show, like the
Oh, hell
individual
yeah.
actor, for example? Yeah, okay.
Hell yeah. There are some actors who never see a photo shoot that haven't been retouched.
Right.
Even the selects, to make the selects, everything gets touched. And I wonder, what do they think of when they go look in the mirror? Are they like, is that mirror lying? Because all they ever see is this beautiful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting to realize, how many how many layers there are between the concept and then the final product, and also how many minds you have to satisfy in that process. I guess it goes from like the original talent through to, I guess, the director, the ad agency
producers,
lawyers, maybe even.
Oh, hell yeah. So I'll tell you, it's so interesting. It's one of the skill sets I have is you can take any one of my posters and go all the way down to the raw photo, all the way down. And you have to, because I am not the end decider. Right. I have my opinion. The art director has an opinion. The creative director has an opinion. The account executive has an opinion. Their liaison at the movie studio has an opinion. The marketing manager or VP of marketing for the movie company has their opinion. The actor has an opinion. The actor's publicist has an opinion. Can you imagine?
Yeah, it's what happens if people have opposing opinions? Do you just leave them to battle it out and then
whoever's higher on the food chain wins.
Right. Okay.
Period. Yeah.
Have you been in a position where, and I guess you probably would have, where you like absolutely totally disagree with whatever you're sort of told to do with a particular shot, and then like how do you handle that?
I do it. I'm paid. This is an interesting point of view, and I think it's important for people, especially if you want to do what I do, which I highly recommend it. I think it's an amazing career. I am in service of my client. This is not my artistic expression. So if they want their, if they need their chin lifted, if they want their boobs bigger, if they want more hair, as you wish, I'm here to please. Yeah. My personal art is where I satisfy that stuff for myself. But I'm under no illusions. My finishing career is in service of a client and a product, not my opinion.
Yeah. And that's exactly how I see headshot photography, for example, especially, things like, headshots, corporate headshots in particular, where the client will have certain comments and it's, I feel the same thing. I get paid. If they want me to make one eye bigger than the other, fine. Absolutely. No problem. Yeah.
I'll tell you a story. I think I mentioned I was an editorial shooter when I started. I love shooting portraits. My favorite thing to do. However, I will tell you my particular thing is to shoot people how they feel.
Right.
How they feel, not how they necessarily want to be presented. And I found that's why I got out of it, because that's a huge conflict. I would have, especially can you imagine in Hollywood, I would be shooting actors' headshots and stuff, and I'd get this really weak kind of person, really interesting, don't get me wrong, but just weak and twisted. And then they need to look powerful and strong.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, I mean, I could do it, but it was just hard, really hard.
Yeah. I mean, it's, it goes, I sometimes have these, I sometimes have clients who are obviously, not particularly sort of comfortable with the way that they perceive themselves,
Yes.
And so, and this is really what it boils down to is perception, because I might look at a particular, client and think like I had this not too long ago, actually. I had a female client. She looked amazing. It really looked absolutely stunning. Yeah. Incredible. Photographed really well. But one of her eyes was ever so slightly smaller than the other.
Yeah.
To the point where, I mean, you'd have to look at it very hard to even notice that. But of course, for her, it was a thing.
It's like this giant thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a huge thing. And so, and of course, it was just a matter of, okay, well, we tried camera placement, but then, in the end, it was just Photoshop all the way, and it's ultimately, it made her super happy. She was absolutely chuffed with the end result. And it's really all that matters to me.
Yeah.
In the end.
It's important to kind of know what your job is.
Exactly. Let me just say a quick thank you to our sponsor, DVE Store. DVE Store's mission is to help you create better video and provide you with the tools necessary to explore your creativity. If you have any digital video equipment needs, whether that's camera equipment, audio gear, or lighting, and much more, you can check them out at dvestore.com. Thank you to DVE Store for the high-def video. And of course, you can find a link to DVE Store in the description.
All right, so I'm going to tell you a story about a photo shoot I did 100 years ago, like 30 years ago. There's a band, I think it's Ministry, Pill, something like that, kind of a heavy metal band. And this guy came to the studio, and his name's Chris Conley, I believe. Sweetest man, Irish guy with that beautiful brogue, long dreadlocks, just adorable. So I shot these really soft, romantic pictures of him. I shot it with a 8x10 Polaroid. So it looked like an old tintype, warm, romantic sepia. And the magazine got it. And they were like, what the hell is this? Fully rejected. Wouldn't pay for it. When they were like, forget this. Well, it turns out during the shoot, he had a cassette, the cell that was, he had a cassette in his pocket. And I was like, oh, can I listen to your music? He's like, no, this is top secret. You can't listen to this. Because I didn't know the band. And I'm like, oh, all right. Turns out he was doing like a crooning album.
Oh, wow.
And then his album company called me and said, can we use these photos? Those photos were perfect for what it was. Perfect. Because I felt him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, of course, the fucker cut his dreadlocks off like the next week and they couldn't use it. And I was like,
oh, no.
Oh. But it's funny. Just one of those things. I like to shoot people how they feel. And it's not necessarily what they're presenting all the time.
Oh, absolutely. And it's sort of, it's an important distinction to make, between sort of one's creative endeavors, and then the commercial side of it, which is basically, as you say, as a photographer or as a commercial photographer, providing a service to a client who's paying for that service. And so ultimately whatever they want is, I need to fulfill that brief to the best of my ability sort of thing. And that's sometimes...
And I'll tell you, even amazing big shooters, it's the same thing with entertainment. When they shoot, when Michael Muller shoots the stuff for X-Men, those aren't like his dramatic, amazing photography he does outside in his editorial shoots. No, because it's gray seamless for someone else to composite.
This goes back, let me see, probably 6-7 years maybe. Yeah, my youngest daughter is 11 now, so she was probably about maybe 3, something like that. I remember we were at a train station, and there was a movie poster at the train station for some superhero movie or another, and there was an ensemble cast. So it was all the superheroes in the same poster, and I noticed that the catchlights in the eyes were different, and so it was immediately clear that they'd been shot in different locations at different times. And so because we had to wait for about 40 minutes or something at this train station, I taught my daughter how to read catchlights and how they, correspond to different modifiers and all the rest of it. And it's funny, ever since then, that's the first thing she looks at. Whenever she sees anything where 2 people in the shot have different catchlights, she always points it out to me. She was like, hey, they were into the studio at the same time.
And you're like, right? I have to tell you, that's one of the things, so funny you should mention this. I don't think I've ever said this ever out loud. When I'm doing posters and I'm doing ensemble casts, I switch out the catchlight. So they're all the same. No one knows I do it. Even my clients don't know I do it. But I think it's because I come from a photo background. I'm like, oh my God, those catchlights. I mean, other stuff won't match, but
but catchlights. I mean, as a portrait photographer, catchlights are so evident. It's pretty much the first thing I look at.
Right.
It's like, what are the catchlights
like? There's a very ubiquitous lighting setup I get for a lot of commercial stuff I do, and it's these 3 lights setups. Oh, and you get 3 lights in the eye. It drives me crazy. I take them out. No one's asking me to take them out, and I'm like, oh God, get those out of the eyeballs.
Yeah, it's so the Peter Hurley style of lighting creates this triangular 3-spot light in there, and
that's it. I take that out.
Yeah, it's an acquired taste, I think.
Yes,
is probably the way to put it.
But people look good. I just don't. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's true. The lighting itself works, it's as a concept basically, and the catchlights are different, and they are sort of very much unique to this particular lighting style.
Yeah.
And of course, in a sense, that has a sort of uniqueness to it. But it's the thing that's always sort of irked me about this is that it's completely unnatural. It's like it literally looks like somebody's looking into some weird, neon
neon tunnel or something, as opposed
Yeah,
to
yeah,
like even
exactly.
like a nice window or something. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
It drives
exactly.
me nuts. It's one of those tiny little things that absolutely drives me bonkers. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's a difficult thing. There's a bunch of different lighting styles that have sort of an impact on the catch. So one is like you can do this thing where you have like a massive 6 or 7 foot softbox behind you, and you shoot,
Yeah.
you shoot the subject head on, and then you get yourself as a as a
Yeah.
silhouette.
Silhouette. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Again, it's also sort of an acquired taste because again, it's
Yes.
you know, but I mean, it's just stylistic differences, I guess.
Yeah.
That's all it is. If somebody was interested into getting into that industry, into the sort of movie poster retouching industry, what would you advise them to do?
So it's a great industry. It's all over the world now. I mean, I have people who we're friends on Instagram and whatnot, and I see their work, and they're in India, they're in Greece, they're in Sweden, and they're doing movie posters for their own countries.
Yeah.
So there's often a lot, I don't know where your audience is, but there is a lot of opportunity all over the place. And the key is to just start. I think people wait for permission. And so all you have to do is be able to demonstrate what they need. So you need to know what do they need. So if you want to work for Paramount Studios, well, do you know what Paramount Studios work looks like? There's a great website, IMPawards.com. It's got every movie poster, I think, since 1910 or 1920 on it, all current posters. And when you go through the posters, it'll show you who designed it. And then you can click on that. It takes you to those links, and you can be like, hey, Joe Design Company in New York or in Tallahassee or in London, I like what you guys do. Can I work for you? You can look them up.
Yeah.
You just need to know the visual vocabulary. And what I mean by that is you need to know what's the product. What do they need? Is it a comedy? Is it a horror film? What do horror films look like? Oh, why are there 3 big heads in the sky, but the name's on the left, but the head's in the middle? That's a billing issue. That is a contractual issue, because first read is from left to right verbally, but first read on a 3 heads in the sky is the first head.
Right.
Middle head, pardon me. So there's a lot to it, but you just got to start, and you got to start compositing, and you don't need permission to make the next Spider-Man poster or the next, the next rock project. Like, do your own, get images off of Getty or whatever and make your own posters. Like, start.
But you mentioned visual vocabulary, and I think that's super interesting actually, because because I think that's really super important to understand, how that works. A good example would be, I mean, you mentioned comedy, for example. I'm thinking of that stereotypical white background, or like, solid white or
or color, solid color. Yeah.
Because that wouldn't necessarily work.
There's a visual language.
Yeah.
If it's horror file, sci-fi, I did a whole class actually on entertainment posters and what they meant, and illustration, like 1980s illustration, or there's different solves, like there's container solves where people are put in containers or boxes. There's the ubiquitous, 1 or 2 or 3 heads in the sky with the little scene. There's water solves, like there's fire solves. There's graphic solves where it's more of a, like, it looks like a printed poster kind of thing, or very illustrator looking. Yeah, there's a whole vocabulary out there of different styles, and they're very specific to genres. So if you look at the X-Men series or the Avengers series, that has a visual vocabulary they use. The Black Panther series, if you look at all the posters, they have a particular style, color, tone, and that's their vocabulary.
The Star Wars is a good example as far as the ensemble is concerned. Yeah,
absolutely. It's a whole world out there. You just have to know that you want to start reading it like a book, if you know what I mean. Like looking at who's the clown that ate children or killed children?
Oh, is it?
I think that has a visual vocabulary. It's got a particular color, a patina. Horror films have a particular style, and you just want to know what moves you and what works for you.
And is that something that changes throughout history? So if we look back at the last, say, 50 years of cinema, for example.
Yeah, but slowly. Like, if you look at Westerns now, they're the same color palette as Westerns in the 1950s. The style of the illustration is different, but the colors aren't different. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that's really interesting,
Yeah, they're
actually.
very,
And that's
very,
true,
very
yeah.
similar. If you look at Sylvester Stallone, for example, and if you look at the Rambo and Rocky series, then you look at Expendables, which was a later film he did, the color palette's kind of similar, how things
Yeah.
were treated. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, it's, you know, it's, you can see, I mean, from a color palette point of view, I mean, you could take Star Wars as an example, and you've got, you get the blues and the reds
Oh
signifying,
God, yeah,
you know,
absolutely, absolutely. And the
um,
Drew Struzan style of illustration. I'll tell you also the weird thing that happens when you want to get hired at an agency. Agencies want to see that you can draw, that you have concepting and you have ideas, more so than super polished comps.
right,
I
okay.
mean, they do want to know that you know your tool, but they really want to know how you think. And oddly enough, market business wise, if we say the truth, they want exciting, new, crazy ass designs, but you also have to do the formulaic designs because that's what's going to get picked.
Yeah. Is that, I mean,
So they want
that's,
you to be a crazy artist, but can you do boring?
do you have,
Or I shouldn't say boring. I'm sorry, traditional or
traditional, yeah,
expected.
or formulaic is actually really good. That's a
Yeah,
really good
that's a good
term.
way. Yes,
Yeah, because
yes,
it's, I mean, there's a lot of sort of, recognizability
yeah,
in movie posters, like, especially
yeah,
if you just think of, like, the way the cast are depicted on it, for example.
yeah,
There's so many stereotypes in inverted commas.
yeah. Well, if you look at Apple now, Apple Films and Apple TV and Apple streaming, there's a certain patina and crispness to all their work. You can see it. It looks different. It looks consistent within the brand of Apple.
Is that has there been? Have you sort of noticed a change in that in that move from the printed poster to the way that we're viewing things predominantly on screens and screening in streaming even?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So the change for me is there's way more volume because
Right.
where it used to be, we gave one vertical board and one horizontal board, and they produced everything they needed. Now we have to accommodate 40 different boards and letterboxes. So imagine you're looking on your phone, you're going to see one. If you're looking on an iPad or Surface Pro, you're going to see a different one. If you're on one of those TVs, if you're on what do they call them, Roku, or if you're through Amazon Prime, everything is different. So there's more deliverables, which means you have to design in such a way that it can be reformatted really easily. So there's that kind of change. It's not the style hasn't changed, the output has changed.
Because I'm just thinking, like, if I'm looking at something, for instance, on a relatively small thumbnail,
Mhm.
I'm guessing if I did like a huge ensemble cast with a lot of fine detail in it, it would kind of get lost in it.
100%. So that's why you'll see different, the studios will pick different ones for different sizes. They'll often have a different, if it's going to be a small thumbnail, they'll pick a different image than the full key art. And I'll tell you another crazy thing. If you have rim light on something on a full key art and it gets pushed down to a thumbnail like this big, it'll look like bad masking.
Yeah.
It will no longer look like a rim light. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it's interesting. It makes
So
perfect sense, actually. Yeah.
yeah. So when y'all are on Netflix or Hulu or Paramount Plus or whatever you stream on Discovery or Apple, notice the big art will be one piece of art, and then the letterbox will often be a whole different piece of art for that very reason.
So how long does it take you, on average, let's say, to create all of those deliverables on one job?
Um, Normal. I'm trying to think of normal delivery. If you're lucky, you get 1 week. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's because all the time is being eaten up in the design phase.
Right.
There's plenty of time, but not by the time it gets to me. By the time I get it, man, they ate up all that time. Yeah.
Have you? What's your favorite? I mean, I guess that's probably a question you get a lot. But what's your favorite movie poster you've ever designed?
Do you know what's funny right now? How I would answer that is the first really creative one I got to do, which is so long ago. It's called The Secret Garden. It's like the lady who was in the Medium. Oh God, Arquette, something Arquette. I'm so bad with names. And
Is it
the guy who
Jennifer
was in
Arquette? Is it?
Roger Rabbit. See, I'm so terrible. I don't know anybody's names. Anyway, the movie was called The Secret Garden, and it was the first time I did a fish all by myself, start to finish. It had like a Polaroid Type 55 edge. It's a nothing burger poster. If you look at it now, you go, what? But it was my first one that was mine, and my signature, like I did it. I got to show my mama, look what I made. Um, Yeah. Other than that, yeah, I don't have any current. I love my job. I just love what I do, so it doesn't matter.
Are you sometimes like in a situation where you're creating like a number of different options, and then the studio picks the one that you like the least?
Oh, all the time. Are you kidding? Almost always. Almost always. I'm not kidding. Like, yeah. And it's one of the reasons I don't design anymore, aside from the money, is you'll see some amazing stuff. You'll make some really cool stuff, and they put the formulaic one, and you're like, no, please. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, but at least you have the satisfaction of actually having the other versions still.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, honey, I don't work in the cubicle. I'm not pushing paper for a living. I get to make art for a living. And how amazing is that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Phenomenal.
Yeah.
That being said, you're also speaking at the iPhone photo conference at the end of March.
Yes. Please join. If you're all interested in kind of figuring out the possibilities of this thing, right? Do you notice how I have it in this huge B script versus just having it as a phone? I do that because folks don't think it's legitimate if it's just an iPhone, because their son Charlie has one. So how could you be a professional photographer if you're using this device? So that's one of the reasons I use this. And yeah, at the iPhone conference that the KelbyOne's putting on, the cool thing is you get so much variety about what people do. Like, we all do it completely different, and something will speak to you. It may not be me. It might be the guy next to me or ahead of me who the way they work, it sparks something, but it's pretty fun.
Yeah, I had a look at the program, and it's really amazing. This, iPhone photography, but there's also a lot of talks about video, for example, which is super interesting as well.
Yeah.
At the same time. So it's and of course, cool. And of course, our mutual friend Dave Williams is going to be speaking as well. So
of course he is. Is he doing the night photography?
Yes. So I think
for the Aurora Borealis.
Yes. So he does a thing on your basic settings, how to set up your iPhone for photography, and I'm pretty sure he does some. He's gonna be doing some Northern Lights thing as well, as he always does.
Yeah, so spectacular.
Nobody better than that. Lisa, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. It's amazing. And I have to tell you, I wasn't lying when I said I've learned everything I know about skin retouching from your creative life classes.
Yay, that makes me happy. Well, if you have any questions, you can email me anytime.
Oh, absolutely.
It's been an absolute pleasure, and nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. And are you still in the snow right now? Is it still snowy?
I am. It's snowing. My wall is covered in snow. We're expecting 22 inches today.
Wow.
I'm from LA originally. This snow bunny business is
yeah, it's incredible.
I'm sure my muscles must be really big from all that shoveling I'm doing now.
It's amazing because you said you're not far from Lake Tahoe, I think.
Yeah, I'm in poor man's Lake Tahoe, as I call it. I'm in an old gold rush town called Truckee. So I'm about half an hour from Lake Tahoe.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I know the area a little bit. I went, part of my honeymoon was spent at Lake Tahoe.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, it's really beautiful up here. It really is.
Stunning. Incredible. Yes, my wife and I went to Canada, and then I saw some relatives there, and then we drove from Seattle all the way to San Francisco, but we hit as many states as we could on the way, so we ended up.
Did you go to Crater Lake on your way down?
Yes, I think we did actually.
Yeah,
I think we did.
Spectacular. Absolutely spectacular.
So because we went all the way through Oregon, went all the way through Washington State, and then all the way through Oregon into Idaho. We stopped over at Boise, and then went from there. I can't remember. We went to Lake Tahoe, I think, and then to Yosemite, I think, and then on to San Francisco.
Fantastic, yeah. I mean, so I have to say that the western part of the United States is pretty spectacular. It really is. For landscape, I mean, it's stuff you don't see anywhere.
It's incredible. I remember like the first 24 hours of that little road trip. I remember starting off in Calgary, flying over the Rockies, like over snow-capped mountains and everything.
Yeah.
Ending up in Seattle, then driving through Washington State and through Sasquatch country,
right,
forest and stuff, which is amazing. And then ending up like going through the prairies of Oregon, and then ending up in what's effectively a desert plain. In Idaho, it was just like, well, we've just covered everything in 24 hours.
Right? It's crazy.
What's
I'll
happening?
tell you, Hawaii, the big island's like that. You drive the whole island, you get all of that in one island.
Lisa, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been absolutely fantastic. And hopefully, we'll speak again in the not too distant future.
It's been great fun. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more great content. But before you go, let me share a quick insight from behavior science. When you engage with content you enjoy, you not only make the creator's day, but you also trigger a positive emotion in yourself. It's a small action that can make a big difference in how you feel. So by liking, commenting, or sharing this video, you're not only supporting us, but you're also benefiting yourself. It's a win-win situation. If you enjoyed this episode, let me recommend another episode that I think you'll love. Check out episode 120 with Dave Clayton, another Photoshop guru with fantastic insights into the craft. And if you have any suggestions or feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Your comments are incredibly valuable to us and help us improve our content. So please don't hesitate to share your thoughts. Once again, thank you for listening and watching. We'll be back next Thursday.